She never spoke much, never stood out. But when a shy young woman is forced to take her sister's place and marry a blind millionaire, no one expects what comes next in a world built on secrets. He can't see her face, but somehow he starts to see her soul. Could losing sight be the very thing that helps him find the truth and love right now? No one is asking if she agrees. Her mother grips Valeria's wrist tightly, pulling her toward the wedding dress hanging like a glittering trap. Her hand is as cold as ice, but her voice rips through the air angrily. Celeste won't be coming. You have no choice. Walk down that aisle right now. The tiny dressing room feels like it's about to collapse. The scent of expensive perfume, the sound of high heels, the whispered commands of the assistant, and the urgent knocking of the wedding coordinator all pound in her head. Valeria says nothing, not because she agrees, but because her throat tightens under her mother's glare. If this wedding fails, we'll all have to beg on the streets. Your sister can't marry him, but you will. You owe me that. Her mother's voice is sharp as a knife, and Celeste, her sister, stands at the door, arms crossed, her face as cold as stone. She says one sentence, dripping with contempt. You've always dreamed of being a bride, haven't you? Then play that part until the end. No one asks Valeria what she wants. No one cares about her feelings. The decision has been made. The dress has been steamed. Her name has replaced Celeste's on the marriage license. And the groom, the blind man waiting under hundreds of watchful eyes, still stands at the end of the aisle. Lucian Drake, blind, wealthy, proud, chosen by her family as a financial catch, a man too valuable to resist, too blind to see the deception. For the past 6 months, Valeria has spoken to him on the phone under Celeste's name. Her voice practiced daily, her tone, her laughter, even her perfume, all rehearsed to perfection. Because, as her mother once said, Celeste doesn't have time for meaningless romances. And now she's about to marry him in a live-streamed wedding under candlelight and stained glass at St. Vincent's, in front of the press, the elite, and a groom who cannot see but feels everything. She walks down the aisle as if stepping into the abyss. The dress has been shoved onto her in 10 minutes. She finished her makeup in 6 minutes. Just as the wedding car arrived, Lucian stands still as a statue, his face serene, posture incredibly steady. His blind eyes are half closed, head slightly tilted as if he is listening. No one knows what he is thinking. The pastor asked if anyone knew whether he could feel that change. Valeria Quinn, do you agree to take Lucian Drake as your lawful husband in honor, to love each other and share responsibilities until death do us part? The air turned cold. Valeria didn't dare to look up. From a distance, she saw her mother nod once, noticing Celeste's smirk at the corner of her mouth. Her voice choked, I agree. Lucian tilted his head. He didn't say anything right away. Then, almost instinctively, he turned toward her, his voice gentle. Why are you trembling? Are you afraid I will see you again? In a fleeting moment, Valeria knew he wasn't joking. He felt something. As the applause thundered, Valeria knew she had gone too far to turn back. She smiled, not out of joy, but because the camera was zooming in, and Celeste was watching from the back row, with the smug face of someone who just won a cruel bet. Valeria told herself it would only take a day, just enough time to fool the crowd. Sign some papers and vanish from the life of a man she had no intention of marrying, as if she had never existed. But those words echoed in her mind like a poorly written line in an unfinished book. They hadn't convinced her. They didn't ease the tightness in her throat. The cold ring on her finger still felt new. Before she could feel the weight of her hand, she had sat inside the car, next to her lawful husband, a man she had never met, yet she remembered every breath he took. As the door closed behind them, Valeria glanced over her shoulder. St. Vincent's Church was now just a faint blur behind the stained glass. Before them lay darkness, and in that darkness, Lucian knew he was trembling without needing to see. The Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly moved, gliding through the quiet streets, shrouded in mist towards the Drake estate, tucked away in the northern suburbs of the city. Lucian sat upright, hands clasped together, eyes closed as if he were asleep. But Valeria knew better. He wasn't sleeping. He was listening, not to the outside world, but to her breathing, the rustle of silk, the soft tap of her shoes on the floor, He had recorded it all as if composing a silent symphony in his mind. She remained silent, trying to breathe evenly. In her mind, the images of her mother and Celeste appeared, their faces filled with satisfaction, eyes like surveillance cameras tracking her every move. From now on, she would live with Lucian as his wife. No missteps, no stumbles, no forgetting a detail Celeste ever shared about herself. However, the moment she stepped into the Drake estate, everything began to unravel. She didn't feel this was home. It felt like a gallery curated by a blind architect. Perfect, but soulless. Dim lighting. The automatic doors opened. Fresh flowers, but no scent. The walls adorned with black and white photographs. Not a single portrait. The butler bowed. "Congratulations, ma'am." Lucian gently placed his hand on her back and led her into the dining room. No words, no greetings, no celebrations. Just the overhead lights silently casting shadows on the endless dining table. 2 white porcelain plates. No flowers, no candles, no music. Lucian sat down. Valeria sat across from him, her hands resting lightly on her dress. Then he spoke. His voice was soft as smoke, but sharp as glass. "Your voice sounds different." She flinched. How different, softer, slower, a gentle rasp at the end of the sentence. She didn't have that. Valeria regained her composure. "Maybe I'm just tired. Today has been a long day." He nodded, then inhaled slowly as if the air contained secrets and perfume. "You're wearing a different one." She grimaced. "I forgot to wear something casual." Lucian nodded again, this time saying nothing, but the air between them thickened, as if he were reading every molecule her words left behind. Dinner passed. Silence. Valeria forced herself to eat, but the food tasted bitter. Lucian ate methodically, each movement practiced. As she tried to stand from her seat, his voice made her stop. "Do you remember our first phone call?" She froze. "What did we talk about?" He continued. "I told you about Paris. You told me about your cello." She pressed her lips together. She didn't remember any of it. That was Celeste before she lost patience with what she called this old-fashioned nonsense. Valeria had only just begun. "Oh, right. I said I wanted to open a bookstore by the lake." Lucian tilted his head. "No, you never said that." Valeria stood still. Lucian set his fork down, his fingers brushing the napkin as if finishing the last note of a sad song. "It's okay," he said. "I have a very good memory, sometimes too good to make others uncomfortable." She didn't respond, just stared at her glass of water, wishing it were something stronger. She hadn't expected the blind man to see so clearly. That night, she walked into the bedroom, spacious, cold, pristine, but devoid of emotion. The distance between the 2 pillows seemed endless. Lucian lay on his side, facing away. Valeria lay at the edge of the bed, afraid to move. The wind slipped through the cracked window. She stared at the ceiling, tears falling silently. Then Lucien's voice rang out, soft and not directed at her, yet penetrating every inch of space. "I don't need my eyes to see a lie." Valeria didn't know who he was referring to, but his words touched something deep inside her. Perhaps the scariest part is not being discovered. Perhaps everything had been understood so thoroughly, so deeply that there was nothing left to hide. So, what do you think? Is Lucian suspicious, or is he already certain? Is he waiting for Valeria to confess? Perhaps the answer lies not in what he says, but in the gaze of a man who has never needed to see the truth. And will you continue to play that role, or take off the mask when the other person isn't blind from the start, after a night sharing the same room, yet feeling like 2 different worlds? Valeria couldn't sleep. She counted each time he moved, listening to every breath, as if trying to figure out whether this man hated her or not. But Lucian did nothing. No accusations, no questions, no touch. His silence was not indifference. It was a thin, soft wall, but as cold as ice. She thought she would be exposed, but the next morning, Lucian still treated her as his legal wife. Valeria began to live in his world, a quiet, precise world, devoid of noise or chaos. And in that silence, something unexpected began to happen. She started to want to stay. She once thought the silence in this house was the worst thing, but then she realized perhaps her presence was gradually changing everything. She woke up earlier, went to the kitchen to make breakfast the way she knew he liked from the assistant's hints. She paused and called the staff. She cleaned and organized his office, a room untouched, silent since the accident. Lucien didn't ask anything. He just touched the edge of the table, the bookshelf, the pen holder, and said nothing. But that night, he gently asked, "You never step into this room, do you?" Valeria's breath caught for a moment. She knew who she was. Celeste. "I know," she said. "I just wanted to make you a little more comfortable." Lucien didn't reply, but his fingers tightened around the wooden armrest. That afternoon, they took a walk in the garden together. For the first time, Lucien let her lead the way without his cane. The wind blew gently. She slowly described the flowers: purple lavender, white daisies, hydrangeas starting to wilt. He didn't interrupt, but then asked, "Aren't you going to tell me about the orchids anymore?" She froze. That was Celeste. Celeste had talked to him about orchids, not her. "I thought perhaps today the other flowers deserved to be heard," she whispered. Lucien smiled for the first time, but it wasn't a serene smile. That's the smile someone has when they realize they're talking to another soul. Night falls. The soft amber light fills the living room. Only the sound of the wind blowing through the window and the trickling stream remains. Valeria sits down and reads to him, not Shakespeare or Bronte like Celeste used to, but a light, quiet novel. Lucien doesn't comment, but he tilts his head, his breath becoming deeper. "Your voice," he says after she stops reading, "is warmer. The way I touch you is softer. Even your silence feels different." Valeria puts the book down, her hands gripping the armrest tightly. He turns his face toward her blind eyes, but still unshaken. Directly, "If you were someone else." He pauses. "I think I might like you more." She doesn't reply. Her heart beats loudly in her chest. She wants to believe it's a confession, but maybe it's a quiet revelation, a gentle way of saying, "I know." And in that long, soft silence, something begins to stir. A little anxiety, a little fear, a glimmer of something unnamed between two people bound together in a strange marriage, one who cannot see and one who has never truly been seen. That morning, Valeria sat alone in the old study she had just tidied up. Sunlight poured across the wooden floor, making the empty frames sparkle. She didn't know why she was there, perhaps because it was the only place no one had been yet. Maybe for the first time she wanted to be herself, even if just for a few brief minutes. The door swung open. No knock, no warning. Celeste walked in as if this house belonged to her. Behind her was their mother, the sound of her heels pounding on the floor like a death sentence ringing out. "We need to talk," their mother said. Valeria sat up straight, trying to stay calm. About what Celeste didn't answer. She walked around the room, her fingers gliding lightly over the wooden table before picking up a book and throwing it back down with a loud thud. "The problem is you're getting too deep into character." Valeria remained silent. The maid said you made breakfast for Lucien, took him for walks, sat by his bed reading to him every night. Celeste laughed mockingly and shook her head. "Seriously, Val, tone it down. Have you forgotten who you're pretending to be?" Their mother interrupted, her voice slow and venomous. "Do you really think he would marry you again? He belongs to Celeste, to this family, not to you." Valeria looked up and for the first time met their eyes. She wasn't angry, but there was something softer in her gaze. "He's not the person you think," she said. Celeste laughed loudly and cruelly. "Not the person we think." What not a blind fool, easily manipulated, Valeria clenched the edge of the chair. "He's kind. He's perceptive. He deserves to be treated kindly, no matter who loves him." The room fell into a rare moment of silence. Their mother raised an eyebrow, looking at her as if she were a child who had just voiced her imagination. "Do you really think he cares about you?" Her voice turned cold. "You're just a placeholder, Valeria. He doesn't know who you are. He loves Celeste. And if he finds out the truth, what do you think he'll do?" Celeste added, twisting the knife. "You think he would forgive the woman who impersonated someone else, or spit in your face because you lied beside him under my name?" Valeria pressed her lips tightly, but this time her eyes no longer welled with tears. She stood facing both of them. If he finds out and decides to leave, I still know I did the right thing, because at least I never treated him like a transaction." The two women were taken aback for a moment. Then their mother spoke as if cursing. "Don't delude yourself into thinking this is love. You're borrowing a place that has never been yours. And when I take it back, you won't have the right to cry." The door slammed shut behind them. Valeria stood still. She had never fought back like that before. But the strangest part was that this time she wasn't afraid. All that remained now was a single question. If Lucian knew everything, would he see her as a traitor or as the only one who had ever treated him honestly? As the door closed behind her mother and Celeste, Valeria did not cry. She did not scream, but something inside her cracked. Not a shattering earthquake, but a slow, quiet crack, as if someone was chiseling away at the last layers of trust she had left. She left the room and wandered down the long hallway to the back porch. The sunset was fading. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, painting the garden a pale, delicate orange. Like her, Valeria sat at the edge of the porch, where the last sunbeams of the day brushed under the trees, swaying in the wind. She hugged her knees to her chest, as if they were the only thing keeping her from falling. An endless, dark void inside her. Her mother's voice still echoed in her ears. Celeste's laughter blended into it like a cruel whisper in the locked basement. She was just a second-rate copy. She wasn't allowed to love. She didn't resist as much as she wanted to. She could only say one thing: he's a good man. And somehow, that was enough to make her mother laugh as if she had just heard a cheap, ridiculous joke. Valeria buried her head in her arm. Her tears no longer fell in bursts. They dripped slowly and heavily, as if her heart had stopped beating and was just bleeding. Behind her, there was the faintest sound. She didn't have to turn back to Lucien. He sat down beside her. No questions, no words, just silence. But it wasn't empty. It was dense, heavy, filled with everything neither of them could say yet. After a long moment, his voice was low and steady. "Have you ever wished you were someone else?" Valeria looked up. The question pierced straight through her ribs. "Yes," she whispered. Every day Lucian nodded gently, without judgment. Then he leaned in, reaching out to touch her hand. Not to hold it, just to touch, as if he needed to be sure she was still there. "If one day I got to meet you," he paused, as if tasting the weight of his words. He was afraid he wouldn't want to look away. Valeria turned toward him, desperate to see his eyes, even though she knew it didn't matter. He couldn't see her, but right then, she felt more seen than ever before. She tried to say something, but her throat was burning. Her heartbeat faltered. The words she wanted to say dissolved into breath. Lucian didn't wait for a reply. He pulled his hand back and slowly stood up. The wind tossed his hair across his forehead. "You know," he said, turning his back to her, "there are some things you can only see. Mars. Without using your eyes." Then he walked away, leaving Valeria alone with the last rays of sunlight and a heart beginning to tremble with something dangerous ready to break free. Lucian didn't go back inside right away. He stood under the porch for a while, still turned away as if weighing something, unsure whether to say it or carry the thought with him forever. Finally, he spoke softly, slowly, but loud enough to catch Valeria's breath. "Tomorrow I'm going to the hospital." She startled and looked up. He slightly turned back, not quite facing her, but his voice was raw, unarmored. "There's a doctor in Switzerland, an experimental procedure. They say the odds aren't great, but there's still hope." Valeria opened her mouth but couldn't speak. No blessing, no objection, because whatever she said now could cut both ways. Lucian lowered his head, his hands buried in his coat pockets. "You know what scares me the most," he said, his voice gentle, but holding something deeper than fear. "It's not that it didn't work." He paused, then gave a weak, almost bitter smile. "It's just that when I open my eyes, I no longer recognize the world I once thought was beautiful, because it turned out things weren't what I imagined." Then he stepped into the darkness, leaving Valeria standing silently on the porch. A cold wind brushed past her shoulders, whispering a gentle, painful question. "If you could see tomorrow, would you still want to see her? The time after the surgery passed as slowly as pages of a book no one ever turns. Valeria didn't ask much. Lucian didn't offer any solutions. She stayed by his side every day, like a part of the house itself. She smiled less and stayed quiet more, because the closer the day he might return came, the more afraid she became of what it meant. And then that morning arrived, a morning filled with soft sunlight, birds singing outside the window, and a pair of eyes about to open after 2 years lost in darkness. The sky was unusually clear, as if even it was holding its breath, waiting for something big to happen. The recovery room brightened and fell silent, the machines humming softly in the background like a gentle warning. No, someone whispered loudly. No one's rushing. The air felt compressed, like the calm before the storm. Valeria sat beside the bed, hands clenched tightly on her lap, cold as ice. Today, the doctor would remove Lucien's bandages, the very eyes she had once touched with trembling fingers, the eyes she had hoped would see her for the first time. But now that hope made it hard for her to breathe. No makeup, no Celeste, no Dior perfume, no silk dress, just Valeria. Simple, bare, real. A woman sitting on the edge of truth, about to lose everything she never wanted to love. Lucien lay still. The last layers of bandages had been removed. He closed his eyes a moment longer, then blinked as if checking a part of himself that had been asleep for a long time. And then he opened them. Light flooded in, fierce and sudden. But he didn't flinch. His gaze swept the room and then stopped. Right in front of him was her. Valeria froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't move, couldn't blink. Her heart pounded wildly, her chest aching from the weight of a hope she didn't dare hold on to. Lucien looked at her. He didn't squint, didn't back away, didn't turn away. He just looked as if he had been waiting to see her, not in surprise, but in recognition. Valeria opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Only her eyes held something between fear and love. "You're not Celeste," Lucien said softly, calmly, like a verdict long considered. It wasn't loud or cruel, but for Valeria, it hit hard, not said straight to her face, but spoken in that last moment. The fragile remnants of her defenses left. She flinched, stepped back half a step, hands clenched, lips trembling. Any excuse or explanation suddenly felt meaningless. But Lucien didn't stop. He sat up, eyes fixed on her. "I've known her for a long time from your voice, the way you place your teacup on the left instead of the right, the way you say, 'I'm sorry,' like no one's ever forgiven you before." Valeria wept, no longer silent tears. She collapsed, covering her face like a child. Her whole body shook, not from shame, but from the fear that maybe, after everything, she still wasn't worthy of love. Why, she choked, her voice breaking like wet paper. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you let me keep lying to you?" Lucian stepped toward her slowly, closing the distance and moving toward a truth they both feared. He stopped, stood before her, bent down, and gently touched her face, wiping away her bitter tears. "Because I was waiting," he said, "to see if you could love me as a man, not just as the final role in your family's game." Valeria looked up. Her eyes met his, newly born into the light, still adjusting, still blurry, but warmer than the firstborn of spring. Lucian took a breath, and for the first time, he said her real name, Valeria. He didn't say it with anger. It wasn't an accusation, but the truth, a name unmasked, a word never spoken before, now sacred in the way it slipped from his lips. Valeria broke down again, but this time she didn't cover her face. She let it happen. Let him see. Lucien whispered, "You don't love me because I remind you of someone? You love me because you dare to be different, because you love me when I have nothing left to give but blindness and loneliness." He pulled her into his arms, light as a thread, but tight enough to wrap around a heart just starting to heal. At the doorway, Celeste appeared, silent, still watching everything she could no longer change. Lucian didn't look at her. He only murmured, "Maybe with myself. I was blind. But in the darkness, I see you the clearest. And, Valeria, for the first time in life, you don't have to be anyone else." After Lucien opened his eyes, Nothing changed loudly or dramatically like Valeria had imagined. No screams, no grand escape, no announcement of an ending. There was only silence, heavy and careful, like two people stepping across a thin layer of ice beneath which lie all the things they still dared not name. Lucien didn't push her away, but he didn't pull her closer either. He remained polite, gentle, just as he always had been, except now his eyes could see. And that scared Valeria more than anything. She felt seen, but also more exposed than ever before. For a whole week, they lived under the same roof like strangers, people who had once loved each other in another lifetime. They avoided sitting at the same table, avoided walking in the garden at the same time, avoided brushing shoulders in narrow hallways. But the avoidance didn't last forever. That afternoon, the sky was gloomy, the backyard smelled of drying herbs, and the season was starting to change. Valeria sat on a rusty iron chair beside the withered lavender bush. Lucien slowly stepped outside, with no real intention, but still stopped in front of her. They sat facing each other like participants in a quiet meeting, both knowing this could be the last page. Valeria kept her eyes cast downward. Her voice was hoarse, not from tears, but from all the things she had never spoken aloud. "I didn't come for you." "Lucien," she began. "I came for a promise, a call I couldn't turn my back on." Lucien didn't respond, but his hand tightened slightly on his thigh, as if it still hurt even now. Valeria continued, this time daring to look into his eyes now full of light, but carrying something close to sadness. "But I stayed, not because of the promise. I stayed because of you. For the nights I read to you, for the moments I wiped your forehead, for every little touch I was too scared to let you know was real." Lucien closed his eyes, then opened them again. He didn't cry, but something inside him softened. He spoke slowly, his voice deeper than usual. "You're the only one who didn't try to control me when I couldn't see. You didn't order me around. You didn't tell me how to live. You just sat by me and listened." That sentence made Valeria hold her breath. She wanted to speak, but instead just shook her head. "I don't need your forgiveness," she whispered. "I just need you to see me for who I really am." Lucien didn't answer right away. He looked at her for a long moment, as if reading every emotion on her face. Then he stood up, not in a hurry, as if something had finally settled inside him after days of silence. He reached out his hand. "If I'm still here tomorrow morning." Valeria looked up. Her hand trembled. "Then stay. Not because you need me, but because you want to start over with me." He paused, his eyes catching the last light left in the sky. For the first time, no longer pretending to be anyone else. Valeria brought her hand to her mouth as if to hold together something breaking inside her. She didn't nod. She didn't cry. But in her eyes, something had come back to her. A feeling of worth, a flicker of hope, a quiet, deserved place in someone's heart without having to change who she was to earn it. 1 year later, in the Oregon mountains, where morning fog blankets the pine forests and sunlight visits like an old, gentle friend, there's a small center nestled beside a clear, peaceful lake. On a simple wooden sign, hand-carved letters read, "The Touch of Light." Lucien and Valeria live there. They don't call it a refuge. They call it a rebirth. Every morning, Valeria guides visually impaired students around the lake, teaching them how to find their way by sound, scent, and the rhythm of their own hearts. Lucien teaches music, something he once thought meaningless. Now, he teaches through sight, touch, and with a gentler voice than ever before. No one here calls him a millionaire. They call him the man who can see in the dark. And Valeria, no one calls her by the wrong name anymore. Meanwhile, in a luxury mansion in Florida, Celeste is now married to a young, handsome, ambitious senator with a bright political future. But 4 months ago, a car accident took away his eyesight in both eyes. Now, every morning, Celeste makes him tea, picks out his shirts with the help of a fashion assistant, and learns how to describe sunsets to a man who will never see them. That blind man, sweet and dependable, calls her the light of his life. Every time he says that, Celeste smiles. But no one knows that her smile always ends with a faint smile on her lips, followed by a silence as long as a memory. One morning, while sitting at her vanity, applying a little red lipstick out of habit. Her assistant's voice came through the Bluetooth speaker. In today's headlines, entrepreneur Lucien Drake has been awarded the International Humanitarian Award for his contributions to the blind community, alongside his wife, Valeria Quinn. Celeste's hand froze. The lipstick trembled in her palm. A second later, she smiled softly. Not bitter, not sharp, just dry and brief, as if something inside her had fallen into the deepest part of herself. She put down the lipstick, poured tea for her husband, and as she handed him the cup, she leaned in close and whispered, soft enough to be carried away by the wind, but never soft enough for the heart to forget. You are not the light, my love. I'm just the shadow standing in the wrong place. Love doesn't punish, but it never forgets. And in the end, true love will see. Pretenders will perform until there's no audience left to believe them. This story reminds us that healing often begins in the most unexpected places with a simple conversation, a shared silence, or a small act of presence. In the quiet corner of a park, where grief still lingers and laughter feels like a distant memory, a single moment of kindness helped a grieving father feel seen and gave his little girl a reason to smile again. What we witness here isn't just the weight of loss, but the power of human connection. The way this stranger didn't try to fix anything, didn't offer empty words, but instead offered companionship and gentle understanding was more powerful than grand gestures. To the father in this story, you are doing more than just trying. You are showing up, carrying love through your grief, and creating a space where your daughter can remember her mother not with sorrow, but with warmth. Your journey is deeply moving, and we hope you continue to let others in. Even when it feels hard, you don't have to carry everything alone. And to everyone watching, if this story touched your heart, take a moment to support this father by sharing a kind thought in the comments below. Sometimes, even digital compassion can ripple into real strength. Let this be your reminder. Small gestures can change lives. Stay present. Stay kind. If you believe in stories that uplift, heal, and remind us of what truly matters, don't forget to subscribe to Touching Tales Hub. Your support helps us keep sharing powerful, heartwarming stories like this one's stories that make us all feel a little less alone.